Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 8 of the Progress Report, a weekly program about local government and economic development in and around Green Bay and Brown County. I'm your host, Bill Meindl. Big thank you to Political Radar for creating, sponsoring, and producing this new show. November 7th, 2017 may turn out to be an important day in the history of civil rights in Brown County, as important as marchers in downtown Green Bay in the 1960s advocating for open housing. November 7th was the day the De Pere City Council passed an ordinance banning discrimination against transgender individuals. De Pere joins Milwaukee, Madison, Appleton, and Dane County, and hundreds of local governments elsewhere in the United States with similar laws. Passage of the ordinance in De Pere was close. Mayor Mike Walsh broke a 4-4 tie, casting the deciding vote, and it's been met with some opposition. 5 De Pere churches, Lutheran, Pentecostal, and non-denominational, and WORQ, a Christian rock station in De Pere, filed a lawsuit last month in Brown County Circuit Court seeking exemption from the ordinance or to have the ordinance declared unconstitutional. They contend the ordinance is too broadly written, that it undermines constitutionally protected rights of churches and religious groups to conduct their affairs in ways consistent with the Bible and their religious principles. Here today is the De Pere Alder who proposed the transgender ordinance, Casey Nelson. Welcome to the Progress Report, Casey.
Thank you for having me, Bill.
Good, glad you're here. First off, congratulations on passage of the ordinance. That's quite the accomplishment.
Thank you. Yeah, it was an interesting experience.
And it took effect March 1st, correct?
Yes. Yep.
So it's in existence, it's on the boards,
Yep.
and it's in effect.
Yep. It went into effect.
Casey, what does the ordinance state and what does it ban in the city of De Pere?
So the ordinance covers employment, housing, and public accommodation. So it pretty much it essentially adds gender identity and gender expression to the protected classes that are protected in terms of employment, public accommodations, and employment. So it doesn't, it just kind of adds that extra protected class to the non-discrimination laws.
Could you cite some examples of what would be considered violations of the ordinance?
So if a bar refuses to serve someone who is transgender, if an employer would fire someone because for the reason that they are transgender, if someone gets evicted because or if someone refuses to write issue a mortgage or to rent to someone because they're transgender.
Have you heard of any of that kind of thing happening in the city of De Pere?
We haven't heard any specific examples of that, no. But unfortunately, it's not something that, especially if it's allowed, people aren't going to come forward because there's no reason to if there's no ordinance that doesn't allow it.
No mechanism.
Yeah. So it's definitely underreported, and this just makes De Pere more of a welcoming and an accepting community, in my mind.
What are the penalties for violating the ordinance, and who determines if a violation has occurred?
So if a complaint comes in, it initially goes to the city administrator. So they have kind of the latitude to try to fix whatever issue is going on.
So a written complaint has to be submitted?
Yes, written complaint. Yep. Written complaint comes in. Initially goes through the city attorney, if I'm remembering correctly, and then goes to the city administrator to try to remedy the situation. And then if that's not possible, or if it's especially egregious, then it will go. Then it would go to an ordinance violation and then financial.
So who determines that if there is a violation of the ordinance, if it moves through the process?
So then they would be issued a ordinance violation, ticket like anything else, and then it would go through the county. It would go through the
municipal court?
Yes, municipal court. Yep.
Okay.
So I'm trying to think of. Yep. So it'd be like any other ordinance violation.
So De Pere Municipal Court would have the ultimate say?
Yep. But you know, hopefully that doesn't. We modeled it after Appleton's, because Appleton was kind of the closest, at least sized community that has this. And theirs actually goes to the mayor, I believe, first. But we reached out to them, and they said the only recommendation they would make was to have it not go to an elected official initially. So that's why we decided for it to go to the administrator first.
So the mayor, De Pere, whoever that person may be, does not have a say in the...
Nope, it's the city administrator that has the ultimate. Well, not the ultimate. They have the initial, try to fix it, and if it's not possible, then it moves on from there.
What are the origins of this ordinance, Casey, and how did the effort begin?
Well, the effort kind of began. I was elected. I just kind of jumped into this.
You were elected in
April of last year, so a little less than a year ago.
Okay.
Definitely never thought I'd be a part of any sort of elected body. So just kind of jumped in. There were certain events in November of 2016 that I wasn't overly happy with, so I had to do something. So this is my way to kind of
get involved.
Get involved. Yep. And then shortly after I was elected, I kind of started to see the national. For a while I feel like we were really progressing on LGBTQ issues, and there's many things that have happened in the last year and change that are kind of going in the opposite direction. And as a alderman in De Pere, I don't have much sway over national or state issues, but this was something that I could do for our community that would hopefully kind of turn some of that back. And before I got involved, I didn't really think about this, but shortly after I was elected, I kind of came to the realization that I actually can have an impact on the community in which my kids will grow up.
Sure.
I'm not from De Pere, but my kids will be. This is the community that they will be from. So, I kind of saw that as a really neat thing, that I can have some input as to what kind of a community that they will grow up in. So, this was kind of my first thing that I thought was really important, and definitely was kind of a challenging one to start with, I would say.
Sure.
But, I learned a lot, and it definitely was worth it in the end.
Since you were elected a year ago, has this been your signature issue, or have you been involved in some other proposals as well?
This has been the bulk of it so far. I introduced a resolution at our last meeting about asking the state to do something on gun reform too, but that's a little bit off, We'll see what happens with that. But yeah, this definitely took more time than I expected it to. I didn't really know all that much about the process, and it definitely was time consuming and took a lot. But
so, about when did you start working on the transgender ordinance?
So
you got elected in April.
In April, yep. So I initially met with the city attorney to just kind of find out what could be done. I met with her in, I want to say probably, I don't know exactly the date, but it was. So we initially introduced it in September, so it was probably like June or July.
Okay. That
we started drafting it, started looking at other cities' ordinances, and kind of see what language we wanted and kind of what we wanted to include.
So that was your first contact, the city attorney's office.
Yep.
Check on the legal side of it all.
Yeah. I mean, I had an idea. I was kind of thinking we'd just go off of another cities, because there's no, you don't have to rewrite the book. You can just,
sure.
So I kind of had an idea of what we wanted, and so she worked on it, and then we kind of drafted back and forth, and then introduced it in September at our finance committee, and then kind of went from there.
Did you talk to alders individually before you introduced it, just to get sort of a reading or their take on the issue?
I talked to a couple of them. I did not talk to all of them, though. No, just a few.
Have you received any criticism, Casey, in person, via social media or otherwise, for pursuing the transgender ordinance?
Yes, and yes.
Okay.
I mean, definitely, online is the worst of it.
Social media?
Social media, yeah, by far the worst. I've gotten a few phone calls too from people that are definitely concerned about the religious aspect of it. And in person, not as much in person. At our meetings, we did have a lot of people speak both for and against it. But there really wasn't too much that was one-on-one in person.
You said social media was the worst?
Yeah, oh yeah, by far the worst, yeah.
On your personal Facebook page, for example? Or?
Not on mine, no. Just on kind of, other pages. Not anything personal against me, against me necessarily.
Sure.
Just more against the transgender community in general, I would say.
Social media can be pretty vicious.
Yeah.
There's a certain pack mentality there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. Some pretty disgusting stuff, I would say.
What's your response to the lawsuit filed by the 5 churches and the radio station?
I'm not, I wasn't surprised by it. They kind of foreshadowed it, during the process. So I thought it was more of a kind of a, I wouldn't say threat, but more of a, kind of a strong arm tactic. But, it is what it is.
They want to be either exempted or they want the ordinance ruled unconstitutional. Is that correct?
Yep, that is correct. Yep. And I read through it again today, and a pretty big piece of their kind of their background and their argument is more along the lines of gay marriage and that they don't believe that homosexuality is okay, essentially. And we've had state law since 1982, I think it was, that this was a protected class. So
Okay.
I'm not exactly, I'm a little bit baffled by it, but
Is there room for an exemption under the current ordinance for religious organizations?
well, I guess that was the most confusing part about it, is that they essentially are exempt already, which the city attorney answered that question probably 15 times during our discussions. They're not considered a place of public accommodation. There's specific exemptions for employment and for housing, actually, too. So, the group that actually is working with these 5 churches is the Pacific Justice Institute, and there's some history with them. They're actually they're considered a anti-LGBT hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Yeah. So they're kind of known to, pick places, and they work pro bono, as far as I understand, and they try to kind of pick fights for religious liberty. So I don't know why these churches really would want to associate with a group like this, but that was their decision.
So the Pacific Justice Institute, which is a California nonprofit organization, it's doing the legal representation for the churches and the radio station?
Yes, that's correct.
You're correct. The Southern Poverty Law Center has designated the Pacific Justice Institute an anti-LGBTQ hate group.
Yep.
And it's a nonprofit conservative legal organization based in California that provides pro bono representation in matters involving religion. A major institution in De Pere is St. Norbert College, a Catholic college. Has St. Norbert weighed in on the ordinance one way or the other?
Yeah, actually, I wouldn't say St. Norbert as a whole, but I worked with one of the assistant directors at the Cassandra Voss Center.
Sure.
And he was very helpful with contacting people in the community that would support this. And he actually spoke at 1 or 2 of the meetings, in favor of it. So I can't say that the leadership of St. Norbert was necessarily for or against it, because I reached out to some people, but I didn't really hear much back. But overall, I would say that St. Norbert was supportive of it. At least the people that I interacted with.
If I'm not mistaken, I believe there's a support. There's support on campus for LGBTQ.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. Yep.
How about the Diocese of Green Bay? Did they weigh in on this, or have they weighed in on this issue?
Not that I've heard. Nope.
Now, you said Appleton was used as the model for this ordinance. And why did you find that particularly a good model to use?
I guess there wasn't a whole lot in Wisconsin to model after. That was a smaller or medium-sized city. Like you said, there's Madison and Milwaukee. So they're kind of the bigger. And Madison has a whole civil rights kind of department, or they have a kind of a board overlooking it. So their process is much more complicated as far as complaints and kind of what they do with it. So we didn't really have a whole lot to go off of. That was kind of a smaller area that's done this. So, but Appleton actually passed it in different pieces. So they passed, I always forget, but they passed 2 of the 3 earlier, and then they passed, I think employment was the last one, like a year later. So they didn't pass it all together, but over the course of like a year and a half, they passed all 3.
Are any other communities currently considering such an ordinance in Wisconsin?
Yes. I know Winnebago, well, I wouldn't say necessarily the same ordinance.
Sure.
But there is definitely a push towards recognizing and protecting transgender individuals.
Winnebago County.
There's some push on Brown County for housing, at least. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely more. And my hope is that eventually, if 60% of the population in Wisconsin is covered by an ordinance that protects transgender individuals, then the state will kind of hopefully wake up and say, hey, maybe we should do this statewide. I mean, that's the hope, that we catch up to the other 20 states that already have it.
Sure.
But I'm not holding my breath.
Following up on an earlier question, has there been any feedback from constituents in your district?
Yeah. There was a little bit, during the process that was, I would say about 50-50 positive, negative, but ever since it's been all positive. At least that from what I heard from people that contacted me.
What were those meetings like where it was discussed at De Pere City Hall? Was there a great, massive turnout of the public?
Yeah, they were intense. It was definitely a very anxiety causing, at least for me, because it was like, oh man, what did I get myself into? Because I don't know what I'm doing. I just, I'm new at this, but yeah, there was a lot of people, especially at the first Common Council meeting where we actually, discussed it. It got tabled at one meeting, and then it went to the next meeting. But yeah, it was a full house, and there was a lot of speakers, and it was many hours long. It was a very long meeting. Yeah, it was a on both sides. There was
I was going to ask you, was the intensity on both sides?
There was. I didn't tally it exactly, but there was a lot of people for it, and there was a lot of people against it. So it was kind of, they kind of played off each other too. It was towards the end, one person would go up and say something, and then someone on the other side, the opposite, someone that was for it would go up and say something, and then someone who was against it would go up and kind of rebuttal that, and then it was kind of like a back and forth. So it was definitely an intense experience.
And Casey, did you say as the process moved along, the intensity waned some?
Yeah. I mean, there was that main meeting, and then
the first meeting was the big one with.
Yes. Yep. So the finance meeting there wasn't too many people there. But then the first Common Council meeting was the big one, and then the second Common Council, because we did the second reading. So I had to go through the same process again, and it was another long, intense meeting. not nearly as long, but it was, a lot of people showed up again, which is good.
And Mayor Mike Walsh cast the deciding vote in favor of the ordinance.
Yes, he did.
Is that a surprise? Did you know that was coming? Had he indicated one way or the other in advance?
He hadn't, and I probably should have talked to more of the aldermen before, because I didn't. I was pretty sure it was going to be. I knew it was going to be very close. But I wasn't sure about two of them. So, but yeah, I didn't know which way he was going to go. He actually voted. He's on our finance board too, so he voted for it on finance. So I kind of knew, after that he would be for it. But it was still, pretty nerve-wracking at the end there.
Sure. Of the 4 alders who voted against the ordinance, what were their primary concerns, as you remember?
Their primary concern was we need to, slow down and get more input from people. Kind of the normal process complaints. We're moving too fast. We need to get more input. Why is this needed? We don't have a problem with this in De Pere. We're a welcoming community as it is. We don't need. This is just another law or ordinance on the books that's unnecessary. That was the main considerations. Yep.
Do you think any other local government in Brown County will pass a similar ordinance? There's an effort underway, as you mentioned, to have the county itself pass a transgender ordinance.
So I think Alloway is maybe considering it. I know one of the first person I met through this process, she actually lives in Alloway, right by De Pere, but so she's working with them to hopefully get that at least started there. But other than that, I haven't heard a whole lot of any other local communities.
I know that I believe it's been talked about at the committee level for the Brown County Board.
Yeah. Yep. And that seems to it'll be interesting to see what happens with that, but yeah, that's for housing by itself, I believe, just for housing.
Just for housing.
Yep.
A personal comment: the Progress Report is a program about local government and economic development. Number 1, passage of a transgender ordinance is just the right thing to do, and follows a long history of addressing civil rights issues in this country. But secondly, if your community wants to attract younger generations of workers and compete with other communities across the country for talent, your city, your county, your town, your economy needs to be welcoming, open, and inclusive. Anything else, Casey, you care to mention about the ordinance?
Just one quick thing to play off that. I looked at a lot of the polling, and for my generation and younger, one of the top things that brings someone to a community to live in is being inclusive, and young people care about social issues more than anybody, I think. So I definitely agree with that. If you want talented young professionals, this is a good way to attract it.
Just a reminder, elections are April 3rd and include the Green Bay and De Pere City Councils, the Brown County Board, Wisconsin Supreme Court, and depending on where you live, school board races and other contests. Vote April 3rd. And that's it for episode number 8 of the Progress Report. Thank you, Casey, for being on the program.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And thanks to executive producer Dan Jones, producer Jacob Jones, producer Darian Goheen, editor Christian Rivera, technician Serena Waryak. Be sure to subscribe to Political Radar on YouTube, join the Political Radar community group on Facebook, and you can support this show financially by purchasing Political Radar merchandise from our shop. For more discussion, check out Blind Partisan, plus Green Bay development news on Skyscraper City. Support your local newspapers. This episode of the Progress Report was recorded March 23rd, 2018. Thanks for watching. See you next week.